Greg Buis competed in the first season in Borneo, where he finished in 9th place and became the first ever jury member in the history of Survivor. Known for his humorous antics, supposed dislike of Jeff Probst and the entire production crew, as well as his apparent romance with Colleen, Greg has gone on to become one of the most sought-after survivors in the history of the show and has obtained a strong cult following. And in his first interview in 12 years exclusively with Survivor Oz, I spoke to Greg about his time on the show and the cult status that has followed him, his relationship with Jeff Probst and Colleen, as well as what sauce goes well with rats and that flying fish. Greg, welcome to Survivor Oz.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Ben.
Massive pleasure to have you on, Greg. I tell you now that not only are you the 6th person from Borneo to be on this show, but we get a lot of requests for survivors on this program, from winners to people like Jeff Probst, Mark Burnett. But we recently held 2 polls to see who people wanted on this program, and you topped both polls by a very large margin. You are in strong demand to be heard from on this program, Greg.
Oh, I appreciate that. I've really enjoyed Australia, so it's nice to be supported by a place that I think is great.
It certainly is amazing too to think that you've got such a following, not just here in Australia, but also around the world. You've almost got a bit of a cult status, Greg, amongst Survivor fans. Now, does this surprise you to hear this, or are you aware of this?
I'm not aware of it, to tell you the truth. It's I wasn't too involved after the show, and haven't been too involved since. I think this is probably the first interview since some of those interviews right after the finale. So I haven't seen too much of the interest afterwards.
It's actually really incredible because there's a few forums based on the show which everybody, the super fans, I suppose you call them, chat about, and you have these threads there based entirely on your performance and your time on Borneo, rumours circulating about your time out there with Jeff Probst, Colleen, and there's videos, and then there's rumours going around that you died in South America and that you've done this and you've done that. And then we had a listener contact us, Erno, from Finland, who's basically said, Greg now works for this company called Pioneer Green, send him an email, see if you can get him on. And that's how we've even ended up talking today, Greg. So I think in 12 years, the rumours and everything that happens, here's proof that Greg Buis is still alive.
That's true. It sounds like some of the fans might remember it better than I do with those going on. It sounds like it's been a very exciting life for me in the past 12 years.
Yes, it certainly has. It certainly has, because I think that, I mean, obviously the first season was when the show became hugely popular, and we've had guests from the first season on here that have ranked among our most favourite interviews. But you in that show, Greg, I mean, we all remember you from everything from sleeping in the bush, dancing, you're crying at the exit of Tribal Council. I think all of this has lifted you right up here in terms of popular Survivor contestants, which is just incredible.
Well, it was a great go. It was a really fun time to be out there. I love the opportunity to be out in Borneo and in that kind of country in the tropics. I had never been anywhere close to that, and it was just incredible. It was the best vacation I could have asked for.
And I suppose the disappointing fact, though, was that it was actually a TV show in the end, wasn't it, Greg?
I mean, that part brings a little bit of fun to it. You don't have to do your own camera work. It's like a family vacation where somebody else is doing all the shooting for you. You're not saddled with having to take pictures of everybody. So it was great. The television part was also worked out pretty well.
That's actually a good point of thinking. I've never really even thought about that, the vacation side with nobody having to try and take the pictures. And that. One thing, though, that a lot of people have asked me in the lead up to this interview, Greg, is what's led you into doing this interview now 12 years after your time on the show?
It was really your persistence, Ben. Just an email that was very simple and asking for it. Again, I haven't been involved in a while, and touching base and reconnecting with Australia seemed pretty attractive. I spent a semester there in college and thoroughly enjoyed my time. It was a great spot.
Fantastic. I believe you spent your time here in Sydney. I think that's what you told me beforehand.
Yeah. I was in Sydney and lived in Randwick and went to the University of New South Wales.
Oh, brilliant. So your experiences here then, I suppose, living amongst us Aussies, did you find it a lot of fun? Did you have some good times trying to adapt to Australian culture?
It was great. Really great people, independent, wild, and out there to have a good time and really enjoy themselves and enjoy other people. I mean, people made me feel really at home by taking the piss out of me now and again, and nobody taking anything too seriously. So it was good.
That's what we like to do here. I found that when I was over there in America. My accent in particular was very popular, and I would get stopped quite often. People saying, "Oh, where are you from?" and Vegemite jokes and kangaroo jokes. It just happened all the time.
Yeah.
Did you try Vegemite when you were here?
I do. In fact, I know it's not going to go over that well, but I recently got some Marmite, which is as close as I can get to Vegemite out here. And recently, just 2 days ago, and was reliving the experience. I got quite a taste for Vegemite while I was there.
Wow.
Vegemite and Blunt.
Ah, yes, Blunt. Now, I tell you one thing with Blunsons, they're actually made right here in my very home state of Tasmania.
Oh, no kidding.
They're Tasmanian made and very proud Tasmanian company, and there's a bit of a connection here to my home state there, Greg.
Yeah, well, they're great. I haven't worn a different shoe since I bought them originally. Now, well, it would be a lot of years ago, 14 or 15 years ago.
Wow, there you go. Big shout out to everybody from Blunsons who just might be happening to hear this. You've got a fan over there in the US, Greg. But in the 12 years that it's been since you've even talked about the show, obviously a lot happens in people's lives over 12 years. And I know for a fact too that personally you're working with a company and helped found a company called Pioneer Green. Now, this is a renewable energy company that helps develop with wind projects and right across the US. Now, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit more about this and how you came to be involved with it?
Thanks, Ben. I've worked in a few different things after Survivor. A lot of land use, working in kind of ranching in Mexico and farming, down into Ecuador for a spell, and working with folks on different uses for their lands. And that continued. I wanted to go back to school to understand it a little bit better, how folks might use their land, and studied grassland ecology in Kansas and in South Africa. And on my way out of that program, started looking to what I thought some of the key issues would be, which are energy and water. And after school, I started on with a company there doing wind energy development, which was, again, working with landowners to find out some alternate uses for their lands, because energy is going to be is currently an issue and is going to continue to be that focus for many of the folks throughout the world. Energy security for each country is a key. So that started the process a handful of years ago, and I haven't really looked back since. I founded Pioneer Green with a couple of folks I had worked with before, and we've been doing well. It's about 3 years now, and we're working on a few key markets here in the United States, continuing to continue.
Fantastic, and obviously keeps you quite busy. You travel around the country a lot, reading there on the website brings you up into Canada as well by the looks of things so it sounds like never a dull moment there.
Oh, no, it's kept my feet running and gotten me to some really pretty country out there. Some really pretty spots in the U.S., Western U.S.
Yeah, and you've been involved in, obviously, as you were saying, a lot of things throughout your time since Survivor and a lot of things to do with the environment and all that sort of stuff too. Was this a big factor, obviously, somebody who likes the environment that drew you into applying for the show Survivor to live amongst the wilderness in an environmental setting like that?
Yeah, to some extent. I think early on, I had a focus on living off the land, living sustainably. I had done a lot of survival classes, and to tell you the truth, it was really my mother that brought me into it.
Wow.
The first advertisement for Survivor was just radio advertisements, and they said, it's going to be, nobody knew anything about it. They said it's going to be 16 strangers with the clothes on their back on a remote island, hanging around for a while, surviving. And my mom gave me a call. She had heard it. My mom gave me a call and said, well, Greg, you've done all these survival classes, and you're such a nice boy. You should really go out there and do it. So she drew me in and really encouraged me to apply. And to tell you the truth, it was kind of a joke. It was kind of a fluke. I had been road tripping around the West on a motorcycle at the time, and didn't have had a lot of time and not necessarily something pressing. So it was fun to apply. And yeah, getting into Survivor, probably a piece of that was getting the opportunity to live off the land in a different part of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it just intrigues me to think, because the people we've spoken to from the first season, I've often asked about how they even came to applying for it, because as you said, nothing like this had been done before. It was completely brand new. No one had seen it. So this was the true sense of Survivor, and the fact that you were all obviously applicants. Nowadays they're all drawn from recruits, and the majority of them don't even apply anymore. So this is where I think the first season was so popular, and people like yourself, Greg, who have come out, your mother suggested this, and here we are today, 12 years later, speaking to you on the other side of the world. It just shows you how much of a big thing this show went on to be.
Yeah, it was a surprise. It was a surprise for us all. When I thought about doing it, I thought it would be fun. I treated it very lightheartedly going through the application process. I nearly backed out rather than go ahead with it as they continued to call the group. I realized it was getting more serious, and I didn't know that it was something I would want to do. But, they re-explained the game, or they explained the game when I started questioning my involvement. And they said they're not looking for Jerry Springer. They weren't looking for something too wild. They were looking to get some interesting folks out there that had a good story and see how things worked out on the ground and have some fun. And when I tried to say that I wasn't interested, my mom followed up again by not talking to me. She said, I think you're missing a great opportunity, and I can't believe it. And that was it. Everybody else had big questions about it. Another buddy of mine said, Greg, I don't know what's wrong with you. I mean, you've got to sober up. How many sheep buy $1 million? At the time, I was looking, not just that I have a love for sheep, but I was looking to monitor a mountain sheep population as a field biologist. And in the end, my friends and family really came through because 12 years later, it was a great experience. It was really fun.
If you love sheep then, Greg, then maybe you should venture to our neighbours of New Zealand. They will probably keep you on board there quite well. But the thing that amazes me about that first season is that with a lot of people that we have seen gone on to do bigger and better things, we still see people get recognised 12 years on from the show. I mean, Jervis, for example, we've got somebody who listens to our show who was recently bumped into him in America, and we had him on the show and mentions people still stop him and say, hey Jervis, I remember you from the first season. Do you ever get recognised at all? Hey, you're Greg from the first season of Survivor?
It happens rarely, more and more rarely. I'd say over the years, probably once or twice a year, I'll bump into somebody who was a diehard fan, and as they keep replaying the shows, it seems to follow up right around that showtime. And it's a surprise for us both. Now that time has passed, it's really fun to chat with somebody who's been so engaged.
Yeah, well, and what did your mum think then of your time on the show after pressing you so hard to go on it?
Initially, she had a bit of a hard time when I got back, and she found that she'd spend less time with me out in public as we'd go to a restaurant. I ended up chatting with other folks more than I ended up chatting with her. She had to drag me home and cloister me in the house to have a word. But overall, I think she's proud of the time out there and happy to have encouraged me to go.
Well, I definitely think so.
Yeah, well, moms are often right, and she was right in this time. It was a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'll tell you one thing, Greg, when we get to our listener questions very soon, we got a lot of listener questions in, I think about 5 times as many as we do for any other normal interview. So a lot of things to cover when it comes to those. But a lot of the listener questions are based on 2 people, and that is Colleen and Jeff Probst. Now, it's been 12 years, Greg, but we've got to ask the question, is there anything that you can tell us with Colleen that did or didn't happen during or after the show? And is it true that you and Jeff Probst did not get along?
Those are both interesting questions. I think they probably require some careful review of the tape. I have not done that careful review of the tape on the show to see what exactly had happened there. But it was exciting. I know that I called Colleen one evening, surprised that it appeared that we were making out on camera, which I don't remember particularly well. So there was some magicry happening there with the cameras. But overall, things went fairly well. Colleen and I gave it a go for a while after the show, and that didn't work out. But I think that she's still doing fairly well. And Jeff Probst and I think we had a love-hate relationship, probably with a little bit more hate than love, but I think we both enjoyed a little bit of jousting now and again, and really I don't think it was anything bad. I don't think it was really wasn't that much hate, but it was a little spicy for some time.
Is it true that you on a couple of occasions got your Pagong tribe mates to actually vote for Jeff? And if this is true, did you end up having the correct amount of votes to vote him out of the game?
That sounds like a good option. I don't remember trying to vote Jeff out, but I wouldn't have put it past. I wouldn't have put it past us at the time. Jeff had a tough job. in the mildest sense. He had to come in there and try and be a voice of the group, but without being part of the group. So, I really appreciate Jeff's hard work and kind of unusual position to be there. And I think we just enjoyed giving each other a little trouble now and again through that tribal council process.
Definitely think so. I know a lot of questions were related to Jeff Probst. It was actually incredible, and a lot of people were mentioning, I think, one of the first tribal councils that they apparently had to hold a production meeting based on your actions in one of the tribal council. I think Mark Burnett mentioned it in his book, that was to kind of keep you guys into line. I mean, it sounded like, Greg, that you just like to have a lot of fun out there and didn't really take too much care for the whole TV production side of things.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. We were out, or at least I was out to have a lot of fun, and Mark and Jeff and the crew had a tough job ahead of them, and I think we did our best to enjoy ourselves. And man, that's reality. That was the trick. So as they tried to rein us in, I probably tried to rein us out a little bit and have some free rein on what we were doing. And we did have some reviews of appropriate tribal council behavior after some of those early tribal councils.
Well, there you go. Well, one thing I was actually reading about you, Greg, too, is that a lot of people, as much as they love, obviously, your antics out there in that season and how entertaining you were, a lot of people do talk about the fact that as a reality TV contestant, you were quite ahead of your time in kind of your realization of what was happening out there. And obviously Richard ended up getting you voted out because he felt that you were a threat and everything. So as much as everyone loves the entertainment factor out there, Greg, of you, does that then almost feel a bit of an honour to think that people will also consider you as a good player of the game, particularly in its first ever season?
I think, I don't know. I think my game was a little bit different than other folks, and that I wasn't so involved in winning or losing. I more of my time playing a game with the production crew and the folks that were trying to create the game. And I think I was a little bit young, a little anti-establishment as far as the actual game was to be played. I was there to go on vacation, have a wild time, and in truth, I think that the idea that I had an idea in my head that somebody was trying to put forward a bunch of money to get folks to do things they wouldn't normally do on national television. And I found that unappealing at best. And it wasn't something that I was willing to do. But rather than play the game according to no rules, you could have gone one route, which was go ahead and do those things that you thought the money was encouraging you to do, act a certain way. You could go the other route, which is not play the game, which is probably the route that I took. Or you could go a third way and really carve your own path and live a way that you could move forward without doing things that are inappropriate, and try and really carry the group forward. So I would say, I don't know that I was much of a gamesman as far as winning the money. I would say I took a route very different from that. And it seems to have kind of polarized folks going forward, that everybody is really gunning to win that game. So it seems like some of those survivors have changed since the first one, which was a little bit more free, even though I think other folks had a lot more of a focus on winning than I did.
Yeah, well, it's definitely, I mean, we spoke to Richard on this show, and I mean, obviously we all know what happened with him, and he was all focused on winning the game, but I mean, other people were spoken to on this show from your season 2 has kind of said exactly what you have said. I mean, they were just there for a bit of fun. They had no real idea what to expect and everything. So I think as the game has developed, that's obviously changed, Greg, but I mean, you guys were the virgins, the survivor virgins, never been done before. Let's give it a try. So, I mean, I suppose you could just do whatever you want in that situation, couldn't you?
Yeah, that's true. I think other folks had a pretty good idea that they were headed for a game. Certainly, it appeared that people who had been around the block, maybe had a few years on them, were a little bit more focused on what that money meant to them and what they wanted to get out of it. And being in a younger, maybe a slightly more idealistic group, we were not as focused. But if you look at it just separating out the potential prize, I think Jervis and Joel were headed down that road of trying to win early on. I think BB also had some of that in him, and I don't know that, and it may have been our whole group altogether. It was was headed that way, could see the writing on the wall. We were just slow to get there.
Yeah, well, I mean, we both had Joel and Jervis, and they mentioned that they were trying to kind of form alliances in the similar way that Richard did, but I believe people like Jenna and that just didn't want to have a bar of it. From what we gathered from them, they were just kind of wanting to play it and not thinking about the strategic element of it.
Yeah, I think that happened. I think that was definitely the case. Some strategy got dropped along the road.
Well, one thing, you mentioned BB. Now, I'm not sure if you can clear this up for us, Greg. I mean, a lot of people thought you were dead for a while, but I think a lot of people still believe BB is dead. Now, do you know anything about BB? Do you know if he's still alive or not?
Wow, I haven't kept in touch with folks very well over the years. I haven't heard about BB being dead or alive, and I hadn't even heard rumors of him being dead, so I haven't seen anything email-wise or otherwise. Yeah, I got nothing for you there.
The last we heard, apparently he was at a fundraiser, I think. There was a news article for a fundraiser for Mitt Romney, and it was quoted as saying local constructor BB Anderson. And a lot of people have said, oh, he's not dead, there he is. But he's somebody that I think, similar to you, Greg, hasn't been heard of really since the show aired.
Yeah. The last time I saw BB was for probably that finale, and he seemed alive and well. But again, that was 12 years ago. It's hard to say. A lot happens in 12 years.
Very much so. Well, you were saying obviously about you felt that the guys were trying to maybe do a lot of things to try and make good TV and all this sort of stuff in terms of that. Was that a lot of the reason why then after the show you didn't want to do any interviews? It was kind of that whole aspect, or you were just wanting to move on from that entire Survivor experience?
That's a good question. Because I had not chosen to play the game, supposedly, and really go down that route of winning money, it was really a vacation, and it was really an enjoyable time. But I didn't quite understand what it was that I would be standing on out there. What would we be talking about aside from, I had a great time. Y'all have seen the show, or the movie rather, of that vacation. And what is it that we have to talk about? I had a great go of it, but life goes on. And I did not see the discussion points because I felt like I hadn't committed to that part of the gamesmanship, which is what people seem to want to talk about. And there's a whole lot of life out there to live. Getting caught up in reality TV when we had already done it seemed like I was burning daylight, where there was some other things I wanted to get off.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've obviously done a whole lot of that in the time since, because, I mean, obviously there are the two types of people on reality shows like that, Greg, is that the people like yourself who you had a great time, you had a great vacation, you just want to move on and get on with your life, or other people too, they've found this new sense of fame. Hang on a minute, I can turn this into numerous opportunities and obviously pursue the goal of trying to be famous.
Sure, and I think with a lot of the celebrity worship that we have these days, that dream of being famous is pretty attractive to a lot of folks. And it's an opportunity, a lot of people don't necessarily know what they're doing, and it's an opportunity to have an unusual job or an unusual way to make a living for a while. And some folks certainly seem to do well at it. I talked to Joel, who we called Country Ray, while we were on the show, about 2 years afterwards. And I remember he had done, I was headed off to, back to the sheep story, I was headed off to herd some sheep in Montana. And we were catching up in the airport as I was making my way through. And I asked Joel what he had been up to, and he said something like 152 television appearances in a year. Wow. And I just couldn't believe it. I think he did well, and I think he really enjoyed that side of things for a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, we had Joel on, I think, about 6 months ago, and he was talking a lot about everything that happened. And it's crazy to think, as we were saying about the popularity of the show, that, I mean, someone like yourself who didn't kind of pursue that, how you managed to go back into a sort of everyday life there. I mean, if you want to go back and herd sheep in Montana there, Greg, I mean, do all the people in Montana all of a sudden go a little bit crazy over this sheep farmer?
Yeah, right. It was a little bit strange, for sure. I had not talked about it, and being in kind of rural parts, not too many people had seen the show, so it was more or less back to regular life. But the show kept popping up, or some of the remnants of the show kept popping up. I had some unusual juxtapositions of life there, from going from first working in rural development in Ecuador, and folks that not only hadn't seen the show, but just weren't involved in much television at all, to rural Montana, where folks weren't necessarily involved and didn't recognize Survivor, and then having to explain that I had to fly off from my job there and be a model in Spain for a week, and then come back and be a herd some sheep. It was strange discussion to have. But yeah, I think they looked at me a little strange, but let me do what I was going to do.
Sounds fun. And of course, as we've said already in this interview, Greg, you've got this celebrity and cult following that you obviously haven't even been aware of.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah.
Well, if you've got some time, I definitely recommend one time having a bit of search for yourself on the internet, because 99% positive comments, and it's almost like when there's a really bad movie that everyone say doesn't really enjoy that much at the time, but over years it gets a lot better, and then people tend to absolutely love it. It's kind of like people enjoyed your time on the show, didn't think too much of it, but 12 years later, no one's heard from you. Bang, Greg Buis is right up here with a bullet in terms of Survivor castaways.
I mean, are you saying that I'm like a bad movie then?
a very good bad movie, Greg.
I appreciate that. Night of the Living.
Yeah, something.
Return.
Yeah, just maybe in those categories. Not, we're not going to go as bad as something like Xanadu or something like that, but I mean something that kind of over time, it just a high level of appreciation.
Yeah, I hear that.
Have you watched any of the show at all, Greg, since your time on it, or have you kind of caught any of it at all?
You know, it was probably about 5 years after the show that I actually saw all the episodes that I was on. I had been working in jobs that didn't have a television all that close by, and finally caught the entire show, season 1, and that was a great watch, very fun. And then I ran into some friends and caught up with them over a couple of seasons of Survivor. I don't remember which ones they were, but I'd catch 1 or 2 episodes at a time and hear some of the backstory, and could understand how people get into the drama and the soap opera of it all. But no, I had not. I hadn't followed it. I had barely followed my own, let alone followed the rest. So, yeah.
It's when we get to our 5 questions at the end, which are Survivor-based questions, then that's going to make that for fun, Greg. But it's a similar story to Kelly from your season. When we spoke to her, she said she didn't even watch your season, hasn't really watched it since. So, I mean, I think, as you were saying before, with sort of moving on from it, I mean, you've just got that vacation then that you can see it as a holiday, and don't really need to see other people's vacations since.
Yeah, good slideshow to watch, good movie to watch, and it was really a great time. A lot of people have applied. As I understood it, there were 6,000 people that applied to the first one and 60,000 that applied to the second one. You know, that popularity had grown, certainly, in trying to get involved. And I would encourage folks to keep trying to go out.
Absolutely. Well, one thing too then, Greg, that if you ever got a random phone call, CBS call you up tomorrow, hey, Greg, we want to do this Super All-Star season, bringing back people from the first season, would you consider going back?
I mean, I guess I'd always consider going back. Depends on where it is and depends on what's going on. It was a fun go around. It would be a little bit different nowadays to stop work and get involved in a new program there, because it's a real time commitment, and that's not as easy to come by as it used to be. I see that it's probably challenging for a lot of the folks that have careers that they're involved with, and less than necessarily just the career, but the opportunity that you're working on something and you don't want to give it up for a couple of months. You're working on something you really like to do. You don't want to give it up necessarily for a 2-month vacation. So I guess I'd say never, but the likelihood is probably low.
Well, there you go. If CBS find this interview, Greg, you never know. There's often talk about old school versus new school, and with your cult status amongst Survivor fans, you never know, Greg.
Yeah, I may just show up on one unannounced, find out where they're filming. Show up.
You just pop up with your coconut phone going, hello, I heard something going on here. Hello, Survivor.
That'd be good. That'd be good. I thought that they had done their last one. Maybe you know better than I do. I thought they did their last one, though.
No, they've still going. 25 is coming in September, and season 26 is apparently being filmed as we speak. So I think that's all they've signed up to do, from what I remember. But, there's possibilities that they'll end up going back. But it seems what they're doing a lot now, Greg, is that they're bringing a lot of the returning players back just for normal seasons, because the ratings aren't obviously as what they were when you were on the show, so they're trying to bring back some of these former characters. But I mean, for example, I'm not sure if you're aware, Boston Rob, who was in the 4th season, went back for his fourth time and finally won it. So if you win it after your fourth go, you think you kind of need to win it after your fourth go.
Yeah, well, good for him. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment, make it through 4 rounds and finally take it at the end.
Yes, indeed. Now, we'll get to some listener questions in just a second, Greg, because we've got a lot of these to get to. But I just wanted to ask, in relation, we were mentioning about Colleen before. Now, she obviously went on to star in The Animal after Survivor. Now, we've got a lot of people asking questions. Did you watch The Animal, and did you think it was bad as everyone else thought it was?
I mean, it's hard to think it's bad. It did have Colleen in it, which, that's the upside. But the movie on the whole, okay, it's not hard to think it's bad. Yeah, Colleen was great. She was certainly a lot of fun, and went on to do a few things there that, I think she had a pretty good go doing it. It's not like you often have the opportunity to do a movie. She never professed to be an actress. So, there's that side of things, but no need to make excuses. It is what it is. Yeah.
It's not one of those bad ones that end up becoming good, I think, Greg. We were talking about before. It's just something that just remains bad.
Yeah, so if you're saying that I'm like a bad movie, Ben, and has done a bad movie, maybe that's a match made in heaven.
Maybe. It's a very good point, actually. And an Australian connection to that, of course, Michael Caton, who was the Professor, a very popular actor here in Australia as well.
Huh, I didn't know.
He's Australian and starred in a very famous Australian movie called The Castle. So there's a random fact for you, Greg.
Yeah, file that one away.
Well, Colleen, actually, a lot of people ask about Colleen as well. So hopefully if we ever tie Colleen up for this program, Greg, we could, get you two connected for a bit of a reunion. You never know.
It's been a while, but certainly a little video chat would be an interesting chat, I'm sure.
I reckon it would be. Well, we'll get to these listener questions now, and of course everybody can send these in, survivoroz@hotmail.com.au, and today's listener questions are brought to you by Cool Flying Fish, because if you're going to get distracted in Borneo, there's nothing better than being distracted by a flying fish. And our first question from Russ Bartlett of Arlington Heights in Illinois wants to know, Greg, what colour was the flying fish that distracted you during your confessional?
I mean, aren't all flying fish blue and silver?
I don't know, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I figure that's what I remember seeing. Yeah. There's only one.
That was the most random thing I think I remember about that season, was just in the middle of a confession. Oh, well, cool, flying fish. And then you're back into telling everybody what you were thinking.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot going on out there. It was hard to get plugged in front of the cameras because, it's nice. It's fine to sit down and have a chat with somebody, but man, that country was just so beautiful. Between the hardwood trees and all of the vines, monkeys all over the place, flying fish. We had the monitor lizards and the snakes and rats all over the place. There was a lot of action.
Snakes and rats too, in terms of the contestants, as made famously by the Sioux, of course, Greg.
Very true. People did embody what was around them. Some of the animal spirits, it seems, and some people did act a little strangely.
And in terms of rats, of course, famously eating those, and you famously mentioned too about thinking that a good sauce would be needed with rat. Have you ever worked out what sauce is good with rats, Greg?
I think that the sauce that goes best with rats is one that covers the gamey flavor. Doing the fire-cooked rat is good. But if you're going to stew the rat, you are going to want to do something that does cover that gamey flavor.
Very good point. Does people still ask you about eating rats? And whenever you see a rat now, Greg, does it kind of bring back a bit of memory for you?
It's almost Pavlovian there, where my mouth starts watering when I see rats. Most people revolted, running the other way. Me salivating and headed for a stick to try and get it.
You just grab a random knife and just start killing these rats all of a sudden. My rat, my lunch.
Yeah, very true. I saw a mouse in a trap the other day, and somebody was getting ready to throw it out, and of course I had to ask, "Are you going to throw that out?"
That was your dinner.
Yeah. Why waste it?
Our next question from David Healy wants to know that in the final tribal council, is it true that you intended to vote Richard all along and was picking a number for both of them just a way of sparing Kelly's feelings?
No, there was no sparing anybody's feelings. Picking a number is as good a way as doing anything when it comes down to it. I thought that the idea of that somehow we get retribution at the end of the show, or that somehow you could hold people accountable for their actions, was a little bit silly. So people had made their choices, and maybe it helps people rein in their nastiness to know that they'll have to answer in front of a tribal council. But you hope that people would rein in their nastiness, feeling that they'd have to rein in their nastiness, feeling that they had to run into folks later on in life, and know that they made those choices. And so I didn't think that there was really a lot of purpose to who else would you have up there on stage, or not. Some question that it was like, tell me how great I am, or tell me how sorry you are, or some other crap. I mean, pick a number. You may or may not make it here.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's interesting, as somebody that hasn't really seen the show since, Greg, that I think Sue's speech in that final tribal council has gone down as one of the best of all time, probably the best of all time. And if you ever do get a chance to watch any of the other seasons and you see some of the tribal councils, I don't think it can match that first season. I mean, you asking them to choose a number, I think somebody did it in another season off the top of my head. They said, choose a number. But it wasn't pick a number between 1 and 10. It was like, pick a number between 1 and a million. I think yours was just nice and simple.
Yeah, Sue was kind of, how do you say, unrestrained in her speech there. And I think Richard would agree, it was never in the bag. No matter what you're trying to do, I don't think anybody ever has it in the bag from early on. There are a lot of decisions throughout the show that play out that affect its outcome. Rudy pulling his hand off of the statue there. I mean, had he not done that, he knows well that it could have definitely changed how things played out. Could have definitely changed the outcome. So there are a whole bunch of little decisions that play into it. So really, I thought pick a number. It is almost random at the end. We all make choices throughout on whether we're going to stay or not stay, but it is pretty random in the end who wins, I think.
Very true, very true. And as I said, very interesting way of deciding it. Now, our next question we have from Doris Locke of Dorothy in California, kind of related to the tribal council aspect and the jury, who wants to know about Loser's Lodge after you were voted out for the jury. How was it being the first ever jury member in the history of Survivor, and were you told that you would have to keep going back to tribal council after you were voted out as a member of the jury?
That first one, so I think some other folks got to hang out for a little while on the island and say goodbye. I was ushered off fairly quickly and came to learn that there seemed to be some belief that I was going to stay on the island and cut the power, was the explanation to me. So I was ushered off immediately and brought to a resort, and then we worked out going back on the show there and seeing if we were in fact going to return every week. And I figured show's over, we've done it, and now you just kind of got to play out the end of it. So I didn't mind heading back. I had nothing. I had no axe to grind with anybody, so figured we might as well. Continue on. And people brought up the question then, as though Jeff and I had an issue, Jeff Probst and I, and we really didn't. It was fun to have our roles on the show, but there was nothing we had a problem with, or I had a problem with him, or I don't think he had one with me. And I would say the most challenging part of that post-confessional experience was really being back on the resort. Man, it was paradise on the island. We had an island that was formed by a mud volcano. You could have your mud bath, you eat your foods, sweat all day, you lose some weight. I mean, it was like a spa experience, but even better. And then I was brought to the resort. It was this unbelievable 5-star resort that had everything constructed around it as though you're living this incredible spa experience with a waterfall leading into the pool with fake rocks and everything else. And putting those two things, the creation of nature and real kind of island experience next to one another, was really challenging. So I think in some ways heading back to the island was a relief afterwards, and showing up for the tribal council was a fun experience. And being back there on the mainland with that 5-star resort was really kind of a trick. Yeah.
It definitely sounds interesting, because I think when we spoke to Joel, he was mentioning, obviously he went before the jury, about them trying to kind of work out how then they bring back the jury and vote for that winner. It kind of sounded like a lot of it was sort of planned as they went along instead of kind of pre-done beforehand.
Yeah, that's true. Throughout the show, I think that the people who put it together did a great job on not knowing what they were getting into, but coming up with a framework that kind of worked and really worked well. They orchestrated a great show. but there were a lot of things that were worked out on the fly, and that was one of them. I remember talking through it with Mark and Jeff and Craig Peligian on how the jury would kind of play out. It was set up that I was supposed to go back and start doing that jury, but it wasn't set in stone. And I think had there been something real wrong with it, or anybody had a real problem with it, that it probably wouldn't have played out that way. And they had come up with some ideas of watching dailies and just doing like a telecast from the resort where we were staying rather than traveling back and being involved in the show again. But again, it was the option to hang out in Malaysia and now and again, every couple of days, go on a road trip and see how your fellow castaways were doing. So why not? Why not go and see a story?
Exactly, and the whole show would be completely different if they didn't do that, of course, Greg. And you will always go down as the first ever jury member in the history of Survivor.
Yeah, that's true. It was, and the jury was it was a little bit strange to step back into that world and look at the folks still out there, still struggling through.
I can definitely imagine that. Well, our final question we have here from Michael Gragar, who wants to know, Greg, if you use a coconut droid or a coconut iPhone, or if you are too hipster now for a smart nut.
Yeah, I mean, I've moved straight to pine cones. We're not in coconut country anymore. I dropped the coconut and it broke the coconut screen. So it's really straight to pine cones for the most part.
How many questions did you get about that coconut when you got home?
Man, there was a lot of talk. There was a lot of talk about the coconut phone for sure. It was a fun experience. That was one of the things looking back that it certainly wasn't planned and certainly made bigger waves than expected while I was there.
I can definitely imagine. I will say thank you to everybody who sent us questions in, and sorry we couldn't get to all of them. We did get a lot of questions too, Greg, as I said, not only about Jeff Probst and Colleen, but also a lot of people about your sister who wanted to know about that whole video and how planned that was, and if that's just you two, your relationship. I mean, that was just interesting.
Yeah, no, there was no planning. That was probably, I don't think anybody knew that my sister was going to be there to give the interview. I think that video was supposed to go to my folks, or at least that side of my family, and they passed it on to my sister to do it. And my sister is probably one of the reasons that I went on the show in the first place, because she and I made the original video to get on there. And so it was just having a good time with her and, and having a lot of fun that led to that video and probably led to getting on the show.
Yeah, it certainly turned out very interesting. Well, Greg, we wrap up every interview set of 5 Survivor-based questions. Now, obviously, as somebody who hasn't really watched the show a lot, we'll explain some of these. Because some of these, you can answer some of these. Just the opinion ones might be a little bit difficult. But if you're ready to go with these, Greg, we'll get started.
Sure.
First question in terms of Jeff Probst. Now, in every season of Survivor, how many different cargo shirts do you think Jeff wears? And if he was to compete, how far do you think Jeff would make it in a season of Survivor?
Ooh, interesting question. His cargo shirts, doesn't he have like 500 of the same shirt?
Pretty sure, and they're all that nice blue, aren't they?
Yeah. They are exact replicas. I would say it's 500. And Jeff on surviving out there, man, I think that would be great. I think it would be an interesting show to see how Jeff does on the road. He's got enough experience there. He'd probably do quite well.
You have to think so. And I could just imagine if you came back then, Greg, and became the host, then you could flip things around and you can try and hold him into line. Yeah.
And that we would, as parents, probably often say to kids that give them a little trouble, I wish nothing more than you have 5 more like yourself. Like you're saying, if I had to go back on as the host and Jeff as a cast member, I'm sure we would enjoy that process.
I think a lot of people would enjoy seeing that too. Now, Greg, this one, again, give your best answer. If you haven't seen much of it, then this one might be a bit difficult. But in the history of Survivor, what has been your favourite season and least favourite season?
Yeah, I got nothing on favorite and least favorite. I guess my favorite season was ours, and my least favorite was ours. I mean, I haven't seen anything but ours, so I got nothing to respond.
Yeah, that's completely fine. Well, this one you'll be able to answer because I'm not sure if you're aware now, Greg, but in that final tribal council, they actually have a final 3 now instead of a final 2. Now, I don't know if you're aware of that to start off with.
No, I was not.
Well, they have a final 3 now, and they actually have the way the jury works, there is a possibility that there could be a tie to decide who wins that $1 million. So if that was to happen, Greg, as somebody who hasn't seen the show in 12 years, how do you think they should decide who wins the game of Survivor?
I think that's got to be an easy one, Ben. We kind of talked through this. You got to pick a number.
Yes.
Yeah.
That easy. Number between 1 and 10?
Likely. I mean, you could tighten it up a little bit if you wanted to. If there are only a couple out there.
I like it.
Just a couple more.
I like it.
Yeah.
That hasn't been answered yet, and you're the perfect person to answer that question, I think, Greg.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, that first go-around, there are some things that I can't believe happened, and I would imagine they've changed since. But we were all there watching how things played out, and then asked to keep a secret through the end on who won. And I wouldn't believe that lasted too much longer. Sounds like it's much more of a real secret situation where not a lot of people know the final outcome until you have the finale.
Yeah, well, I mean, your season was the only one where they revealed it at that final tribal council. Now they don't reveal the votes until the finale where it's live in front of America. So there's I suppose, a 6 or so month period between when they've filmed it and when it airs where even the final 2, final 3 don't even know.
Yeah. What's the favorite Survivor of the fans, of your fans?
Of our fans is in terms of people who have been voted for sort of like a favourite one, or?
A favourite show versus least favourite show. Is there a consensus?
Well, a lot of people vote for your season and the second season because, I mean, obviously they were very popular. We're tallying the votes up very soon, and I would say that first and second season are the most popular, but also season 16, which was a fans versus favourite, so they got like 8 returning players versus some new players, and also season 20, heroes versus villains, so you had, your evil people versus your good people, are very popular. Least favourite, season 5 in Thailand's not very popular. The most recent season that just aired of One World wasn't overly popular. I can gladly say your season has never been voted as the least popular, Greg. So you're on a very popular season. Don't worry about that.
Oh yeah, well that's good to know. But interesting to see that they've been able to keep it lively for folks for so long. 25 seasons sounds like there's still pretty good attendance.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's certainly, as I mentioned before about super fans, you get a lot of people who have obviously grown up on the show, and we're starting to see now some winners of the show who are massive fans. The winner of the 15th season, Todd, who we had on not too long ago, he was known as the first super fan to win. He'd grown up on the show and seen every episode and was an obsessed fan and went on to win it. So who knows, Greg? People are channeling their inner Greg in terms of getting that right level of entertainment value and the bad movie factor out there for future seasons.
Yeah. I think we should change that maybe to cult movie factor.
Yeah, okay, yeah, cult movie factor. Well, as I said, you've got a cult status, so yeah, cult movie. I like that. And people study and go to see late night screenings of cult movies at midnight. People can do that with Greg.
Yeah, like a Rocky Horror Picture Show, kind of a freak show.
So would people then dress up, I suppose, in with coconut phones and come running down the beach asking who killed the chicken and all that sort of stuff?
Absolutely. Wear what you want. Wear your shirt for your pants. Feel free to dress or undress as you feel so inclined.
Sleep in the bush and come arm in arm with a Colleen.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like most of Australia, no?
Yeah, we just do that every day. What can I say? I mean, as soon as I finish this interview, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Headed out to the bush.
Yep, that's what we do. That's where we live. Just eat some kangaroos and kill them with our boomerangs.
Yeah.
Now, our final 2 questions, what I'll do for these ones, I'll alter these ones slightly just for your season then to make it so you can answer them. Now, this question generally is who is the most undeserving winner and most deserving person who didn't win. So I'll say to you now then, from Richard's standpoint, do you believe he was the most deserving to win your season? And is there somebody in your season who you think deserved to win if Richard didn't win, if that makes sense?
Oof. So let me see if I got this straight. You're saying if I were Richard, so I'm thinking as Richard of the season and what I think of the deserving versus not deserving folks. Is that right? That is a tough question. I believe Richard would probably find himself to be the most deserving. So speaking as Richard, I am the most deserving. And I wouldn't necessarily say that was wrong. Deserve is a tough question to speak to, or a tough topic to speak to. If by deserve you mean worked hard, goal focused, had envisioned a particular path, and had done everything with mistakes along the route to get there, and then by luck and skill and potentially that visioning had gotten to the goal. If that makes somebody the most deserving, I would say that Richard is certainly up there from my perspective, as well as his own. I wouldn't imagine he thinks of that too differently. If there were somebody else to put up there in his place, man, that's hard to say. I think. I don't think it was an issue for Rudy ever. Like deserving, it seemed kind of like a walk in the park for Rudy. It was kind of hangout time. There was no challenge for him aside from maybe just making it through day to day, putting up with folks that he thought were not necessarily the folks that he'd want to hang out with every day. But then again, maybe we all felt that way. So maybe Rudy, other folks that had tried to enact it and more deserving, I don't know. Anybody who tries to do it in their own way was at least potentially deserving. But I think Richard did a good job of it.
Well, I can tell you when we had Richard on the show, Greg, that within about 30 seconds of starting talking to him, he was already mentioning he was the greatest of all time. So you were absolutely right. And in our final question is generally who is the greatest survivor of all time. And again, Richard clearly answered himself.
Yeah, that's a good point. Some things change after 12 years. Some things don't.
Richard doesn't, although the one thing I suppose that doesn't change is that maybe he needs to learn how to pay his taxes, potentially?
Maybe. It kind of seems like he's making those mistakes over and over again. Yeah, few things to learn out there.
Big hello to Richard if he is listening. Well, I'll say the final question then for you then, Greg, made up on the cusp. In terms of your season, who was the person, well, I think we kind of already know the answer to this one, who was the person you got along with the best out there, and who was the person that you just could not stand whilst you're out there in Borneo?
Oof. I think I probably answered that question on the show to some extent. I certainly got on let's try that again. I certainly got on well with Colleen. She was a real pleasure to be around on the show. We really had a great time being out there. I got on well with Jervis too. He was really a classic for someone who had come from where he had come from, living in the city, not knowing how to swim. He sure was relaxed in his thing. And I have a lot of respect for Jervis and did at the time. He made a real strong impression on me for just how comfortable he was in a completely different world from the one he was used to. And he was not afraid to try new things. He didn't love Rat, but that's not a requirement of enjoying your time out there. So he was a real pleasure. Joel was really fun he had a strong personality, and I would say he was fun to be out there and kind of a caricature of himself. And he was really fun afterwards too. There were some pretty good folks to be around. Let's see. And the people that I didn't care for, well, my mom used to say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So I think I'm going to have to stick with that
How
one.
did I get a feeling you were going to say something like that, Greg? I could just see you delaying that answer very much, and then you were just going to say that. You don't even want to give a nice little teaser as to somebody you just didn't get along with.
No. A lot of water under the bridge. I probably told more than I needed to say on the show of folks that put a little sand in your shorts. But we live on the beach. I mean, sand gets in your shorts. It happens.
We'll say Jeff Probst then.
Well, even still, that sand reminds you you're alive when you get a...
Very true, Greg. Very true, Greg. Well, Greg, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Honour here after obviously so long since you've even talked about the show, mate. Thank you very much for giving us your time. We'll put all details on our website to do with our Pioneer Green so people can read more about it, see how they can get involved, etc., etc. And you're welcome back on this program anytime you like. And hopefully one day, mate, you never know, we might see you again on our screens in Survivor.
Thanks a lot, Ben. It was a real pleasure to be here.